We had 12 chat rooms running simultaneously, with delegates able to visit any 5 of their choice. 20 to 30-minute sessions plus Q&A. Given it's an interactive session, the audio is sometimes affected, so apologies in advance.
To give you just a little bit of a taste of what we've been up to on our place, and then what broadly I do around Australia nowadays, which really does dovetail totally into the native plants space, because in the long term what we've been seeking to do as a family and also to extend in my work further afield is that if we increase landscape function, natural landscape function in whatever areas we are, then of course we need less outside inputs, especially non-renewables, to keep things functioning. We're all a bit fond of eating, so we've all got a part in this. A little bit about me. That's me and my family, wife Roz, and 3 children out, and we live between Narromine and Trangie, so that's about an hour west of Dubbo, so put us about 5.5 hours drive west of Sydney, slightly northwest, or an hour's flight if you get lazy like me. And part of the background, a little bit of a brag thing here, just a couple of weeks ago got awarded the Bob Hawke Award, the highest land care award, so that's been a big thank you. Right. I'm quick to say that you just sit on top of a pyramid, in truth, don't you, with everything. It's all, there's so many people that have helped us along the way, and so much knowledge and everything, and today's another part of that for me. I'm sure there's going to be some things that folks say that I'm going to say, aha, that's another little aha moment for me. But, and part of that too, little photo here of my 92-year-old mother there, planting trees last year with my daughter, who probably doesn't look quite as enthusiastic at that particular moment as a grandmother, but there's been a bit of a long-term commitment by our family to plant trees, but also I'm 4th generation farmer on our place. On previous generations, we did a lot of clearing and simplifying of the landscape, and here's the weird bit. I'm trying to recomplicate it, re-diversify it from what it was. And so at any time, of course, we can only know what we know, so I'm not judgmental about what's happened in the future. And hopefully in the same way, of course, my kids and grandkids are going to say, why did Dad or Granddad do that thing there? We're only got the information that we have at our time, and that's what's exciting as well as challenging, of course. We keep on finding out more about our world and all the processes and everything, and we'll just throw in a little photo like that, which is just spider webs on a gate. But for me, those are the nice parts of being out on our place, of seeing more stuff happen, and over time things like, and somebody that identifies frogs will be able to tell me what that one is, but that's one off our place, and it's a large burrowing frog, like big. It looks like, when we first started to see them appear on the place, we thought, oh my God, do we have cane toads here, or what's the story? But that's just a little sign for us of me not growing up seeing those. Oh, is it?
Yeah, drum. Interior, I can't never say. Like a pobblebong.
A pobblebong.
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Great. And big. Big. You think those things have dug a hole in the ground and they dig down, but it's an interesting sign. Like, we can measure lots of things, but oftentimes it's the simple native things that tell you that obviously there are enough processes there to keep an organism that's that big, and it's living in the soil, waiting sometimes for years for the right circumstances to emerge again, because you only see them infrequently. And that's the sort of measure I take, and it makes life interesting too, doesn't it? If we were just a production farm and everything, I'd find that too boring nowadays. And that's a photo there of a quandong, not life size. I wish I could grow them that big, quandong, which is a sample of Humanardum native tree, great one of the bush tuckers that people might use, and grandparents and parents and that sort of thing are very fond of that. So we grew a number of those for a number of years, and they're partial parasites, so they're a bit difficult to grow and propagate, but good fun. Once again, it's all, if there isn't that part of it, that element in the bush, well then, we're not going to keep and retain people, and that's an important part of the theme that I'd like to put forward too, is that with our huge continent that we have, we can't keep on just running an efficiency drive and ending up with less and less people, because it's more economically efficient, because that's a collapse of communities, and then why bother about caring for the land if you don't have folks involved with it? Not meaning that we've got to get everybody to travel out there either. It's not for everybody. What beautiful surroundings we have down here. So part of what we've done on our place is actually invent a different strand of cropping, which is called no-kill cropping. And even though it's a title of that, it can be used for non-cropping purposes, for actually regenerating and rehabilitating areas that have previously degraded. That's another use. But what we're after is that we want to keep our full grassland that we've reinstated on our property and actually grow crops within it. And the way to do that is we retain the whole complexity. So that's why no-kill cropping is different and substantially a branch on its own on the whole tree of various different cropping methods, that it doesn't use simplification to grow crops. It actually uses more and more complexity, and we place our plants that we wish to harvest in amongst that complexity rather than replacing all the complexity. And the bigger, broader reason for doing that is, of course, grasslands are some of the most threatened ecosystems, especially in the agricultural areas, because it makes logical sense right around the whole planet. We've replaced grasslands in order to grow monocrops of things, and we produce lots of food, yes, but we're actually undermining the whole possibilities for us to do anything about climate change or general species decline, because we're taking out the pieces that connect our whole landscape. It's at a base form. So what we do, and there's a bit of machinery for anybody who wants to tyre kicking, but what we do is actually place the seed into the grassland when it's dry, and that's a critical point there. So it's just placed in with zero disturbance, so we don't kill out any plants when the machine goes over the top. We're just cutting a very, very small slot. So essentially it's about a centimetre deep, half a centimetre wide with the machinery you do, and it's not tilling the soil, it's not dragging stuff through, it's actually two discs that are rolling over the top of the ground and cutting a slot and dropping our seeds in. So it leaves the whole assemblage of plants there. And there's a few consequences of that. One is that we're not doing some of the things that nowadays are inherent in regular cropping, where the deep compaction of heavier machines goes right down. There was an interesting recent 6 or 12 months ago, comparing the impact of dinosaurs relative on the ground versus modern machinery. And guess what? The modern machinery is doing great damage to depth, because proportionately the weight has gone up, but the tyres and tracks have expanded, but not at the same ratio. So therefore, when those machines are going across the ground, especially in moist conditions and that sort of thing, they're having a bigger, deeper impact, which is essentially, some of those things might be hard to ever unravel, because obviously our ability to operate with plants here, operates to certain levels, and we're trying to maximise that, but there is a limit on that. So by travelling over the soil when it's dry, the soil's at its maximum strength. So therefore we're doing the least impact there, which means that the fuel usage is very, very low, which is once again, we're after trying to reduce our inputs radically, not just try and be a bit more efficient. So a little photo there, and it's of my son's tractor. He's got all fancy. A cheapskate old farmer like me who used old stuff, but he's managed to get new. So he's got his Land Cruiser ute. The tractor and machine uses 16 litres of diesel per hour to go and sow approximately, in the old terms, 20 acres, in the modern terms, 8 hectares per hour, so 16 litres. When he drives to town in his ute, he uses 18 litres an hour driving on the main road. So we can reduce things but still try and make most use of the free energy, of course, that's coming down from above, and that's what we're trying to maximise and capture. Of course, is trying to get that energy in the most effective way and still be usefully practical in a true business sense and in a logistically reasonable sense for us as a farming family. So there's some comparison photos that we'll show you as we go along, and here when it comes to, you can look at the detail. We've got the crop growing, and then we have a strip here that's unsown between the next bit of crop, and then you can see what the comparison is, the application of no-kill on an area or not, and how much actual growth you get out during a year. And then this is the similar situation, but at harvest time, getting near harvest time, of what you can grow on an area or not, right, is not actually just limited by letting nature do its own thing. Yes, that's all fine, but us having an intervention is sort of the same way that one might view in a very diverse forest situation where you have if you have a very skilled forester, of course, that's carrying around a chainsaw, well, is the chainsaw good or bad? Well, it depends on, of course, the skill of the forester. That an amount of disturbance in any ecosystem can be either, of course, constructive or destructive, and we've had plenty of things. That's a photo of just at coming into harvest time, just on dusk, so that there's a photo there, and then there's a series of photos of actual harvest time. And what I'd like you to pick up is that everything that was underneath there is still remains. So we've been able to place a crop in amongst there, and essentially what we're trying to do is keep on adding cream on top of the cake without taking away the cake, because that is maximising the whole thing. So I have a bias towards Australian native plants, and I'm not just saying that because I'm in amongst friends here and pandering to the audience, but in a biological sense it makes the most sense that every time we see a recruitment of a new, or I shouldn't say new is the incorrect word, re-establishing a native plant, that of course is bringing a package of biology with it as well that's functioning, the whole soil part of it there. It's an assemblage of things that, whereas when we see a new plant that's not native, well, we still welcome that as long as it's not taking over the whole neighbourhood, as long as it's not invasive from that point of view, then we welcome the additional diversity, but the package that it brings to the whole cycling isn't, of course, as large as a native plant re-establishing in that situation. So more harvest photos there for you to pass around, and it's really about trying to expand the pie and just maximise our use of the two free things that occur, which of course is sunshine and moisture. And then having the biggest diversity of plants there means that at any time that rains fall or don't fall, of course, we've got activity going. So that provides, of course, a longer tail of plant activity and therefore production for us in the real sense of making money into drought times, but also when there are infrequent rains or only small marginal rains that in a regular production system wouldn't be useful, we've got plants that can make use of it, and we have some of these critters to do it. And the reason I put these, you would have enjoyed the day we went to the toy store to get those, because I pulled up with a bunch, and the guy behind the counter, quick as a flash, he said, "Oh, it's rained, you're restocking, are you?" Much faster than me. These are the means, not the end. So for us, the end is maximum amount of plant activity. these are the attendants on the machinery, if you like. The machinery is the plants, and so that's a different sort of a view, of course. We still like to take pride in what we do there in our production, but it's quite a different emphasis than standard thing where, you know, you go take the fat animal to the Sydney show or whatever like that, and that's your focus, and then the other bit gets subsumed, the whole resource base. But we're adopting a different attitude, and so after our harvest with no kill, it allows now for a number of different streams of additional products to come off that one field, instead of the standard cropping field just being essentially one plant nowadays and everything else killed out. We've got a multitude of things. So after harvest, we press some bales, but they're no longer hay bales anymore. They're actually graw bales because they're a mixture of grass and straw. So that's a new sort of thing that we're able to do there. And so when we provide that to our animals in a drought time, that's a different product, of course. It's a diverse something that we're putting in front of them rather than just single elements. And this is a little picture of my son post-sorting the grain, because one of the regular and reasonable questions is, well, Bruce, you're growing this stuff in amongst all of this and you've got all of this other stuff. What about all of that other stuff? That's actually a great thing now. This is actually now a new stream of potential products, and we're only at early days of that yet, but lots of discussions with artisan millers and flour makers and all of that, but also more importantly we've been talking to brewers, which has been which is much more important. But that additional material, instead of it being seen as a waste, if you think about it from a diversity point of view, that's actually our wonderful Australian natural advantage, but even more importantly right down to local provenance. Because our grasslands in our place, if you were to implement it just down the track very anywhere you were, even all the same things, it's going to be a different grassland. It's going to exhibit a huge number of different phytochemicals at that plant level, which inherently, in the end, whichever way we use them, whether we're using it this way or whether we're consuming it in a different way, is inevitably expressed to us as consumers. So that's the exciting part of making a different pitch toward the value of our Australian native plants in the Broad. That composition in the grassland can no longer be the way it was if we go back in our time machine a couple of 100 years ago. We've got lots of waves of other plants that have joined that whole mix in every area, and that's just it is what it is, and it's going to be different into the future. But one thing we can do is try and maximise the nutrient diversity we have that we're taking in, because that's one thing that's sort of driving some of our dietary things nowadays. Another little couple of little bits here just to emphasise that no kill is, we've been talking about the production side and how it's manifested on our place, but how we're applying it out in outback and pastoral settings for rehabilitation of various things. So this is just a little test machine, a single machine where the pastoralists can see what's the effect on ground level where you have bare soil and you're seeking to start reclaiming it. And I thought I'd quickly as well throw this one around as well, which is a comparison on a very degraded place in Western Australia, in essentially an old flogged out holding paddock next to a shearing shed, many years, and the application of no-kill over the top starts processes that can happen, because if we increase, of course, organic matter below the ground by getting it to grow above the ground, we're starting a process where other things can reinitiate, and that's a really interesting part of the whole thing. So not only making use of what might be there, but actually reinstating functions that are there by using a minimum of outside inputs, because that's it. Makes sense as well. You don't want to be spending money, So jumping away from no kill now towards animal behaviour work, which is one of the things that I travel around Australia doing most now, and in a couple of days' time I'll be out in the WA outback on stations there doing work with self-herding. So that's something, if you wish to have a look at, you can go on the website selfherding.com, and essentially that is redistributing the way these critters walk across our landscape and interact with the landscape. And the larger the areas, if you can imagine these, a lot of the stations of work, that sort of thing are sometimes millions of acres in the old terms, so really, really big scale. But how important are those folks out there to us here, right? They're part of our whole weather cycle and part of our whole biological cycle, even though they're much geographically removed from us. So if we change the behaviour of these animals, then we change the whole landscape functions in those areas. If we just let animals do what they want to do in any area, well, surprise, surprise, they're like us, or we are like them. We're all creatures of habit, as much as we might not want to admit it, we are, of course. And so because we're creatures of habit, we tend to redo things that are familiar. It makes sense. That's what's comfortable for us. They are the same. So if we just chuck them out into a paddock, large or small, right, those habits tend to repeat, which means that areas in our landscape are over and underutilised. Okay, and so anywhere that's overutilised in the long term is an erosive and degrading effect on the landscape. So once again, think about these things as tools rather than the end point of what we're doing out in the landscape. We start changing the way they occupy out there, and we start changing the way the whole vegetation and therefore everything else that flows from that and biology. And there's a couple, when it comes around to you, a couple of maps here, you'll see that the animals have redistributed, and that's as livestock collars where we've been tracking with them with satellites and so forth, of how you can start changing behaviours. But like with all behavioural stuff, you don't usually break a habit, you usually replace it with something else, don't you? Right? Unfortunately, and that's all. It's easy said than done, isn't it? Especially trying to quit something. And a couple of very quick photos here to pass around, where we've actively brought concentrated groups of animals to create more diversity in a landscape. And so this is in large dune country out from Exmouth in WA, and there's two things here together that you can compare the year afterwards, and you'll see in the second one that there's a heap more diversity in those little patches. So if you like, we've done the effect of a similar effect of what you'd do with patch burning in different ways, right? So it's not an either or, don't think about it that way, but by bringing concentrated energy in small parts of the landscape, you actually spin out more diversity because of that than if you didn't have it there at all. Right, so if we just established a national park and said, we're taking these tools off the table, there's a certain number of elements there of disturbance that we're actually taking out of our toolbox. So it's just a way of thinking of it in the same way that one wouldn't want to take fire out of the toolbox in our Australian landscape. It's how it's used, isn't it? And same old deal, it's not the cow, it's the how, about how that is, and absolutely they can create lots of degradation, and we can do the other though as well. So I'll throw that around. That's some of the various different things we've been involved in. One little one that might be of interest to you, a couple of things is this little brown dot you can see, which is Compost Buddy, which is a free resource that we initiated out of the constructive farming cooperative, which is a free resource for people to decide whether they should put compost on in the broadacre sense, more in a paddock sense than in your backyard. You can still use the decision tool for a particular soil type in your backyard, but it's very much aimed at trying to get nutrient return. So much of the food that we consume in modern day Australia ends up at the landfill one way or another, or at mine sites or something like that, when it could be going back to growing food. It seems a loss to the system. So that's one of the things we've done, and then some of the other sites. Quickly as well, some other props and instrumental stuff. Maybe some of you have read Charlie's book, Charlie Massey. So there's a bit there in there about us if you need to help get to sleep at night or something. There's a portion in there. I'm going to recommend another book that you quite likely have not seen. That's Fred Provenza. Worked with Fred for about a dozen years, and he was instrumental and his team from Utah State University were really instrumental in a lot of the animal behaviour work that we developed here in Australia. So we've been able to take that on further, and that's where the self-herding field came out of, with Dr Dean Revell and myself developing that. And then it gets smaller as it goes along. That's a book I co-wrote. It's looking a bit thin compared to their efforts, but and that's available for free at the on the selfherding.com site there for you. So brief, and I'm kind of going through, and just wondering how I'm going time-wise. Anybody got an idea?
It's almost quarter past.
Almost quarter past. Mm-hmm. So we got. Let's try and figure another 10 minutes. Great, thank you very much, timekeeper. That's wonderful. So I'll broach another subject, and then we might get into some Q&A and discussion, rather than your ears keeping on getting a bit of an ear bash. But and this is slightly on the negative, unfortunately, for you. But I do have to mention it because it's widespread in our agricultural areas now. Unfortunately, a lot of the work that we've done on our place and is coming undone now through forces that are beyond our control. And I want to talk about climate change, talk about externalised chemical exposures. So we're going to start passing around some photos here of representative things that we're seeing around in our agricultural areas, and particularly, unfortunately, I live in an area that's afflicted by cotton growing, so the externalisation of those chemicals annually in the autumns, we're seeing a mass destruction of not only what we've planted, but also our old growth woodlands, which I'm very passionate about, because you'll see that there's quite a lot of destruction going on, and just to sort of give you a bit of an inkling that unfortunately this is happening, and it kind of affects all of us, because it's a blanket over everything, over all of our food production, that there's uncontrolled exposures happening. And we're not just talking about, I'm not just whinging about my neighbours or anything like that. It's not that sort of a deal. These chemicals are going tens of kilometres away from where they're being applied. So the difficulty is there is no refuge anymore in the ag areas, and that photo, as an example, that those were trees. We planted 100,000 trees in 2007 for carbon credits, and the majority of those are dead now. So in the future, everything that we're talking about, carbon storage and everything, our effects of that are down to plants, aren't they? And in effect of doing something about that. Apart from that, so this is a really serious issue, and we'll have here get it broached. And I'll just finish off and take your question first, if you like. Is that probably in a few weeks' time there'll be a landline story on us of our win with the Bob Hawke Award, but it'll broach this for the first time in the mainstream media. It's well known out there about people, but most people can't speak about it, because, especially if you're a food producer, you can't say, yes, my vegetation is contaminated here, but I still want to sell my produce. So most people are completely constrained.
If you enjoyed this presentation, then please subscribe to our channel. Other presentations from the conference are available in this playlist, with new ones being added all the time.